1995, in Midway, Arkansas. Two of his best friends, 17-year-old Steve Hannett and Jace Kelly, asked Steve's mom to drop them off at the lake that morning for a fishing trip. When Steve's mom returned to pick up the boys in the evening, they were nowhere to be found. The next day, one of the boys was discovered walking along a deserted highway 1,379 miles from the lake where they had been fishing. What he recounted to the authorities was truly astonishing and unbelievable. He shared this story shortly after being picked up on the highway. I still can't believe where I am right now, and I'm also struggling to believe what happened to Steve and me. Steve's mom dropped us off at the lake yesterday around 7 a.m. We usually try to arrive earlier, but we were late because I had a hard time waking up. I wish I had gotten more sleep. As we stepped out of the van and gazed at the lake, it appeared like glass. We exchanged glances, and I remarked that today would be a good day for fishing. Steve nodded and said, "Yeah, buddy." We had fished on this lake many times, so we knew precisely where we wanted to start fishing, as it typically yielded a lot of catches. I remember waving goodbye to Steve's mom as she drove away. We agreed that she would pick us up sometime in the evening. We didn't have a set time, and we brought enough food and water for the entire day. After that, we went down to our usual spot and started fishing. We fished for a while and only managed to catch a few fish when Steve suggested, "Hey, let's try moving around the lake. Maybe the fish are in different spots today." I nodded, grabbed my gear, and followed Steve along the shore. Every 15, 20 feet, we would stop, cast our rods, and if nothing was caught after a few casts, we would move on. We repeated this process for a while, exploring different areas of the lake. The lake we were fishing in is sizable, and on one side, there are numerous trees and dense bushes that stretch for kilometers into the forest. As we approached the trees, I spotted what looked like an old, beaten-up green and white camping trailer being towed by a truck. When Steve saw it, he looked at me and remarked, "This is strange. We come here all the time, but we've never seen it parked." We continued walking closer to the trailer, and as we did, I noticed something peculiar. "Steve, look at this. There are no tire tracks from the trailer or the truck that pulled up to it. How did it get here?" "Yeah. Besides, there's no way he could have driven in through those trees," Steve replied, pointing to the dense forest surrounding the trailer. We exchanged puzzled looks, and the unease was evident on his face. Like me, he sensed that something was amiss. What he suggested next caught me off guard. "Let's go see if it's open," Steve whispered. "No, let's just go fishing. I don't want to mess with that thing," I replied. "Come on, man, don't be like that. We'll just take a quick look, and if it's not open, we'll go back to fishing," he said. "Okay, let's just do it quickly," I agreed. So we began walking slowly towards the trailer, roughly 20 yards away. The closer we got, the more I wished we were back at the lake. The dense trees and bushes were infested with mosquitoes. When we were a few meters away, Steve looked back at me and said, "I'll go check if the door is open." I nodded and stood still. As he approached the door, about to grasp the handle, a noise erupted from inside, as if someone or something leaped and started rushing toward the door. This caused both Steve and me to startle. We abruptly turned around and sprinted in the opposite direction. I recall hearing the front door creak open and the sound of someone or something sprinting swiftly behind me. Steve veered to my left and yelled something, but the words got lost in the commotion. I ran at full speed, with tree branches and bushes smacking against my face and eyes. My vision blurred from watering eyes, but I pressed on. The thicket of bushes and trees seemed endless, signaling that I was veering away from the lake and deeper into the forest. After a considerable run, I halted behind a sizable tree to catch my breath. The moment I stopped, a powerful blow struck the back of my head, and I collapsed to the ground. Then darkness engulfed me. The next thing I knew, I woke up in a dim space, greeted by the scent of dust. I attempted to move my arms and legs, but they were bound, restricting my mobility. The atmosphere was stifling, and sweat streamed down my face. I screamed, but the limited reach of my voice indicated futility. As I lay there in the darkness, a barrage of painful thoughts flooded my mind. My mind raced with questions about how I ended up in that place, and who or what had struck me on the head and bound me. Concern for Steve consumed my thoughts as I fought back tears, praying for his safety. He had been my best friend for as long as I could remember. Out of nowhere, the space I was in started moving, and I surmised it was the trailer by the lake. A gentle humming sound gradually intensified. I puzzled over how we could be moving since the trailer was seemingly parked with no visible means of transportation nearby. The humming persisted for a prolonged period before abruptly halting, giving me the impression that we had ceased moving. I was on the verge of drifting into sleep when a sudden jolt roused me with a start. Fear and panic gripped me as uncertainty loomed over what would happen next. Minutes passed in an anxious hush, and then I discerned what sounded like a struggle. A forceful impact against a solid surface reverberated with a loud thud. Alarming thoughts raced through my mind as I contemplated Steve's predicament. Was he confined in darkness like me, or was that the sound of his struggle? I continued to wrestle against my restraints, attempting to free my limbs. I felt a slight sense of progress, though it was challenging to discern in the confined space, my mind inundated with panic. The next fragment in my memory involved a forceful grip on my hair, yanking me out of the enclosure and dragging me across the floor. The abrupt halt by my captor left me sprawled on my stomach, hands bound behind my back, paralyzed with fear. It took a while for my eyes to adjust, and when I finally looked up, a horrified scream escaped me. I couldn't comprehend what I saw on the trailer's wall. Steve's headless body hung on an upside-down cross, his severed head positioned just below. The agony etched on his face was unbearable, a testament to unimaginable suffering. Overwhelmed, I closed my eyes, hoping it was a nightmare. After a few minutes, I cautiously reopened my eyes, half expecting the ghastly sight to persist. Instead, a man stood before me, his gaze etching a memory I'd never erase. The whites of his eyes were vivid against his black-painted body, clad only in black pants and barefoot. His slicked back, shiny hair completed the chilling tableau. He adorned his chest with an inverted cross extending down to his stomach, where the name Malphas was inscribed, seemingly traced by his fingers. Uttering no words, he effortlessly lifted me from the floor and deposited me onto the table beside Steve's lifeless body. Suppressing my urge to scream, I found myself mere inches from Steve's headless form. The man positioned himself behind me, audibly rummaging for something. After a few moments of commotion, he returned, looming over me with one arm encircling my form. In his grasp was a tool I recognized as a sickle. Initiating an incomprehensible chant, he raised both hands in the air, and I resigned myself to the imminent grisly fate Steve had suffered. As I lay there, bracing for the end, an unexpected sound pierced the air, a voice, deep and raspy, conversing in an unfamiliar language. Intrigued, I opened my eyes and witnessed the most horrific sight imaginable. In the backdrop of the painted man stood a creature, an amalgamation of man and beast. Cloaked in black fur, it stood on two legs, emanating an aura of terror. His His crimson eyes bore into mine, and attempting to describe his visage remains beyond my capacity. The painted man nodded in acknowledgement while the creature spoke, and abruptly the creature transformed into a large black bird before vanishing. The man gradually lowered his arms, pivoted, and retraced his steps to where he had retrieved the sickle. I lay in a state of bewilderment when, unexpectedly, the painted man reappeared, seizing my shoulder and unceremoniously pulling me off the table. My body collided with the floor, and pain surged through me. Closing my eyes once more, I braced myself for the final blow. Contrary to my expectations, the man seized my hands and began severing the restraints. Subsequently, he amputated my legs. Lying sprawled on the ground, contemplating my next move, he abruptly yanked me by the hair and dragged me toward the door. With his free hand, he swung the door ajar and continued hauling me outdoors. As I tumbled to the ground, I swiftly pivoted to face him. Gazing down at me, he uttered, "You are not the one the master is looking for. Then who are you? Why are you doing this?" I screamed at him. His gaze remained fixed on me, and his response echoed with chilling certainty. "I am the hand of the Dark God. I am the Dark Messiah. I am vengeful," he declared, before abruptly turning and re-entering the trailer, slamming the door behind him. Without hesitation, I scrambled to my feet, attempting to distance myself from him as swiftly as my numb legs allowed. Glancing back repeatedly as I moved away from the trailer, the last time I looked over my shoulder revealed his complete disappearance, a vanishing act that left me disoriented. It was then that I realized I couldn't recognize my surroundings. I found myself in the midst of the desert, seemingly in the middle of nowhere, or so I initially thought. Having never been in the desert before, my knowledge was limited to images from books and television. I traversed the desert aimlessly, uncertain of my destination, until eventually reaching the highway. Exhausted, I lay down in the middle of the road, awaiting rescue by a passing car. When a vehicle arrived, I was taken away. The sense of loss for my departed friend overwhelmed me. Disbelief lingered in the void he left behind. Jace Kelly, discovered 1,000 miles from his previous location, was found near Bullhead City, Arizona on Highway 95. Good Samaritans passing by located him lying in the middle of the highway and promptly took him to the nearest police station, where his parents were informed. He trembled, clearly in a state of shock, and surprised everyone when he finally spoke. His first question was, "What state am I in?" The following day, the parents of Steve and Jace flew to Arizona. Jace recounted the same astonishing story to them as he had to the authorities. As unbelievable as it sounded, they had no option but to believe him. There was no conceivable way Jace could have traversed such a distance. During that period, there were no records of Steve or Jace taking a flight, which would have been the only plausible explanation. A missing person report was filed for Steve, initiating a search for him. Jace guided the authorities to the location, explaining that he had been taken out of the trailer and released by the enigmatic painted man. Examining the ground, officials found Jace's footprints alongside what appeared to be the imprints of 4 trailer tires, leading to a dead end. Strikingly, there were no tire tracks approaching or departing from this spot, suggesting that the tire prints materialized mysteriously. Steve was never located or heard from again, eventually declared deceased. Over time, Jace withdrew from society, rejecting interviews and refusing to discuss the events. Rumors circulated that he embarked on a quest to find a green and white camping trailer, an endeavor he supposedly continues to this day. For more chilling horror stories, please subscribe.